Yeah, it is really bad. Their success is purely leveraging,
Logistics.
yeah, and obviously insane amounts of money. Like
Yes.
in a vacuum, the Echo speaker would have been a failure
Yes.
by
But
a lot.
they had everything else.
Right.
And yeah.
But I guess that can be said about a lot of things. I mean, without the iPhone, the Mac might have failed by now.
Really?
Or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm just spitballing. The Mac obviously has always had really slim market share. I don't know. I think Apple would be a very different company if the iPhone hadn't if happened. I think the Apple would be a very different company today. I mean, obviously, because the iPhone is by far their most successful product ever. But uh,
I
I
I
think
have some.
I'd be struggling.
We, I mm, I know that the Mac crowd would be very mad at that statement right now.
Yeah, definitely. But the
And
Mac,
again, they have
realistic about how unimportant the Mac is technically to Apple's bottom line in an average quarter.
an average growth there. It's still like a Fortune 500 thing, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Anyways, um,
Mm.
I guess we should get on topic. Looks like people are
Yeah.
in. This is probably going to be a pretty popular show given the subject matter. Uh,
So hi to everyone joining us for our recap of Made by Google 2020.
yeah, I mean, actually, we can start off with that. I think as of today, now that Google has shared their own or leaked their own product names, we now, I think, know pretty much every product that Google's launching this year. If we want to go down the list, we can start with, I guess, the Nest speaker that Google just tweeted out yesterday. Basically, I mean, they didn't tweet it out, but they sent it out to about a dozen journalists who all tweeted it out. So it was effectively the same thing if they had just tweeted it from the Made by Google account, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a Nest branded TV dongle of some sort that we've heard about, and that Janko Rutgers over at is he Protocol? I believe
Protocol, yes,
he
protocol.
also wrote about. So we're very confident that that's happening. What was the other one that besides the pixels? What am I
I
forgetting?
think is still unknown.
Okay. So yeah, the pixels are apparently there's three of them, and that's the Pixel. Well, as of today, we know, or we're pretty confident. I mean, Google updated the Google app this week, as they very often do, and they added the Pixel 4a, or was the 4a already in there?
No, I think I don't think it had the name beside it yet until we checked today.
Gotcha. So the 4a was added alongside its code name, which is Sunfish. And then the Pixel 4a 5G was one of the surprises, and it was added alongside its codename Bramble. And then the Pixel 5 retail product name was added alongside its codename Redfin, right?
So objectively, Sunfish has the best name, objectively, for this year's code name Roundup.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that they're still able to do this, and they still haven't run out of fish names.
Yeah, it's so esoteric now in terms of like fish that people have actually eaten in their day-to-day lives.
Right. It's getting farther and farther away from fish that people have heard of. Actually, it's hard to tell that they're even fish anymore. I feel like
Yeah.
similar thing kind of happened with Apple with the Mac OS releases and cats. They kind of started to run out of cats, and they're like resorting to more esoteric ones over time. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's enough fish out there that Google's going to keep naming their products after fish. But anyways, the main story today is that the Pixel 4a, 4a 5G, and Pixel 5, if we're going to take Google's update at face value, are the three Pixel phones that are coming later this year. And from there, we were able, I mean, we already knew everything about the Pixel 4a, right? So, I mean, that phone has been extensively leaked by multiple sources, including ourselves. It's going to have a Snapdragon 730. It's going to have that single camera on the back, a plastic build, a pretty small battery and screen. It's a pretty small phone in general. It seems like it's about halfway between the size of the Pixel 3a and the Pixel 3a XL. So it's kind of the screen size of the larger 3a XL last year, and the body size, roughly speaking, of the smaller 3a. That phone, for anyone that's listening to this podcast, is surely already heard everything there is to know about it. And there's been pictures, and there's been pictures of retail boxes. I mean, it's straight up out of, Pixel launching out of Ukraine type territory in terms of leakage. So yeah, the Pixel 4a Sunfish, that's unsurprising. Nothing new there, really. But the other two code names that surfaced, Bramble and Redfin, were already code names that we had dug up, or maybe it was XDA that dug them up. I haven't been following that super closely, but they were dug up back in February, and we didn't really know what they were. We didn't really have any way of clearly connecting them to any existing product. I think that the Pixel 4a was originally going to launch in May, and so a lot of leaks happened much earlier, and it was much easier to connect it earlier on. But now we can say pretty confidently that Bramble is the Pixel 4a 5G, it seems, based on what we know, and Redfin is probably the Pixel 5. And this goes back to last week. I mean, kind of the main way that we were able to make this connection is that last week, a very unknown leakster by the name of XLeaks7, who partnered with some small retailer of skins and cases, I forgot what the name is. He did basically like a on leak situation where he got his hands on CAD renders, or he got his hands on the CADs for these two phones, and mocked them up, and I guess sold the leak to this one site that he partnered with. That's pretty much how that leak game works. And so those were posted last week, and Abner, we didn't post those, did we? I don't think we did. But yeah, that's what happened. We didn't post them because we just didn't really think that they had it wasn't really clear what was going on with the Pixel 5 or Pixel 4a 5G. We didn't really know what was happening with that leak. We didn't really know how to connect it to anything. But after today's confirmation of these names from Google, we know we can guess that that's what these devices actually were. So it looks like, I mean, the main reason we're able to make this connection is because the Pixel 4a 5G would presumably not have a head. Well, actually, yeah, it would have a head. The 4a 5G would have a headphone jack, whereas presumably the top end Pixel 5 would not have a headphone jack. And that was one of the very confusing things about last week's leaks when we were following them, was that this guy XLeaks7, he posted these CADs of a phone that he called the Pixel 5, and we kind of were skeptical and didn't post them, as I mentioned, and then he posted these other CAD leaks, which also were distinctly not, neither of these CADs were clearly the Pixel 4a, the smaller Pixel 4a. It seemed like these were genuinely new devices, so we were really confused when he posted the larger 5XL, the phone he called the Pixel 5XL, and it had a headphone jack. So it didn't make any sense to us that the 5 would not have a headphone jack, and the 5XL, which would presumably be the larger version of the 5, would have a headphone jack. That just didn't make any sense. But now, after seeing the way that these products are actually named, we can start to piece things together. And so we kind of made that connection and assumed that this Pixel 5 XL, which is not a Pixel 5 XL, it's probably the Pixel 4a 5G, which is, the second of the three phones that Google actually accidentally leaked today in the Google app. So yeah, so basically the 4A is the 4A. What he leaked as the 5XL is actually the 4A 5G, and then what he leaked as the Pixel 5 actually seems to be the Pixel 5. So is that confusing enough?
Let's start with 4A 5G. 4A 5G. That is a real choice. 5G in parentheses, mind you, according to the Google app. So that's a thing. That's going to be an interesting how they're going to actually style it. You had the theory that it would be similar to how Apple has the iPhone XS last year, and the S is inside a tiny box. So maybe there could be some styling crossover there. But yeah, these 5G, it's not hard to imagine that this year's every flagship smartphone this year having 5G is because carriers are demanding it, because US carriers specifically, they are looking for the next bump in sales as they invest into the 5G infrastructure. They need to get people on it. Actually, they need to get people upgrading, getting new phones, and getting on 5G. So that's what's appears to be driving that trend, and Google is following in that trend.
Yeah, I mean, it's really confusing and hard to piece together exactly what these three phones are and what they mean and why Google made these decisions. And I think it's the Pixel 4a one is the easy one to understand. It's basically an easy follow-up to the Pixel 3a. It makes a lot of sense. It's just basically an upgraded version of the 3a, and it's going to be priced in a similar manner, and it's going to have a lot of the same value proposition. And then the Pixel 5 is kind of also in some way easy to understand because it's going to have 5G, which is not surprising because every phone this year is going to have 5G, and it has the 765G, which is Google saving costs and not going all the way up to that 800 series processor, and it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg. And Google seemingly doesn't want to go head to head with the top tier $1,000 phones anymore. Seems like they kind of want to stick in this middle high range of the market and see if they can make inroads there. And so I guess the way I'm interpreting this is the 5G also, it kind of also makes sense in a way. It's still a curveball compared to the yearly cycle we've seen so far, which has been, a two pixels every year, and a smaller and a larger version, and both of them were 800 series processors for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so this year is definitely odd because Google's changing it up, but we've kind of anticipated this ever since like February when Kyle and you and Dylan were piecing together what processor the Pixel 5 was going to have. And it seemed like early on that Google was going to go with the 765G. So we've kind of mentally been preparing for this, that the Pixel 5, the top end, the highest end phone is going to be that, and probably bring over a lot of those premium features from the Pixel, so it can still kind of justify that mainline numbering. But at the same time, Google's seemingly knocking it down a peg in terms of ambitiousness. And so really what we have here is a Pixel that's kind of in between these, that is kind of weird, right? Because if our theory is correct and this CAD is to be believed, then the Pixel 4a 5G is actually larger in physical size than the Pixel 5, because the CAD that was shared that was supposedly the Pixel 5 is smaller. And so the one without the headphone jack is smaller, whereas the CADs we've seen for months and months and months have that. For the Pixel 4a has a headphone jack, and then presumably this 4a 5G also has a headphone jack. So that's where we've landed. But the question is like, what is the Pixel 4a 5G and why does it exist? And I think it speaks to what you're trying to get at, is that the carriers are probably the ones pushing this. And David over at Android Police, close friend of the site, he actually had a tweet thread of this after I kind of posted my rundown of like, these are the three phones. I'm pretty sure this is where they're supposed to fit. He posted this tweet thread basically saying, carriers don't want an iPhone alternative. They have plenty. They want lower cost 5G entry points, and it seems like Google is like trying to fill that void. And also, I found it very interesting this final note he made in the thread, which is, I don't know if people listening to the show remember, but David had an exclusive report, according to his sourcing at Android Police a while back, that the Verizon and Google deal had fallen apart, and that Google wouldn't actually have the Pixel 5 on Verizon at all this year, much less the 4A or 4A 5G. And he's speculating that perhaps Google had to come to Verizon with some kind of new plan before they would even agree to renew the deal. And so that would explain why he had heard from his sources that the deal had fallen apart, because perhaps part of the compromise is that Google was going to launch this 5G phone that's a little bit more affordable, that can help Verizon expand its 5G business. So do you buy that? Do you think that's likely the core reason that the Pixel 4a 5G exists? Assuming all of this assumptions are all correct.
Yeah, it's again, given this trend of carriers mandating 5G this year being the year of 5G, and maybe we're 6 months, 7 months into the year already, and maybe carriers have started to see how their flagship push for 5G isn't really selling that many phones. Or I don't know. I haven't heard a person be excited about getting 5G yet, because the network simply isn't there. So maybe there's this, from the carrier perspective, they want to try something at the mid to low end of getting cheaper 5G devices out there. And with that in mind, it does make sense. What's interesting is Google's willingness to do this. I did somewhat assume at the beginning that because Google was foregoing the processor, the 865, that they were foregoing a top-end flagship, that could have signaled that they would also forego 5G this year, because be it whatever that adds to the hardware design, whatever impact that's on battery life, and whether there's actually a consumer impact of having 5G on your phone. So with all those things, I thought that they wouldn't, that they would maybe not have 5G this year. But from these code names and putting it into the mid-range phone, the phone that sells the most, if the 3A was any, if the provided any guidance, is they look to be adamant. They look to be very into this 5Gs with two out of three phones.
Yeah, and I think another thing that may be playing a part here, or maybe would help piece this together a little bit, is I think that you and I, as people that are blogging about Google and phones all day, I think we forget the impact that the 4G to 5G transition is going to have on consumers. Just similar to the 3G to 4G, I think that at first there's not going to be hardly any noticeable difference for the vast majority of people. I mean, I've seen so many cases of customers showing that the current 5G networks on all of the major networks that are offering any kind of 5G are just barely better, if better at all, than current 4G LTE. That's obviously when we're talking about sub-6 5G versus millimeter wave 5G. Clearly millimeter wave 5G, which by the way is kind of Verizon's tentpole, I guess, or kind of that's their big focus. That's going to be the 5G that people are going to notice more, especially for those that live in urban areas. But I think maybe what we forget is what you and I are smart enough, right? We're aware that's true, and so you and I are probably not that compelled to buy a 5G phone this year, because we don't really see the reason. I mean, there's really no reason in 2020 to buy a 5G phone unless you live in a city that has very heavily blanketed Verizon millimeter wave, and you specifically need that for some reason. So yeah, you and I are not compelled, but I think the marketing that's going to be put behind 5G, it's kind of a pseudo a pseudo technology for now. It's obviously going to get to a point where every phone has it, and for good reason. But for now, it's kind of a pseudo technology in the sense that all these advertisements are going to be pushing 5G into consumers' brains as something that they need to upgrade to. But vast majority of people are not going to know why or what the point is, or they're not going to notice any benefit at all. And so I think Google partly might be just riding that mindset or that mind space, I guess, wave this year, with Apple putting insane amounts of marketing dollars behind 5G, and all the carriers putting insane amounts of marketing dollars behind 5G. And obviously Samsung's been doing 5G phones for a while. So I don't know. It feels partly to me like riding an upgrade trend. And if they can have one of the best phones that offers that particular upgrade trend at a certain price point, then that might make it an attractive option for consumers that don't know better. Not to say that Google's doing anything intentionally malicious. I just think that might be a marketing or a market reality that they're playing to.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see their marketing copy for 5G. How they frame it, what benefits, I'm just very
They're going to
curious.
frame it anything. They're just going to frame it the same way everyone else is framing it, which is 5G is nebulously better than 4G. And it's probably going to be worse for some people. And, it's like, they're not going to
have to dedicate a hot minute to the 5G aspect of these phones, especially if it's in the name during whatever virtual announcement or blog post they end up running. So I think they have to, especially if they're putting their resources behind, again, the 4A 5G, this phone that not too many people expected, frankly.
Yeah. One commenter actually on the live stream right now said, could the 4A 5G be the 4A XL? And that's a good question because one, we don't really know for sure, but it looks plausible that the development that went into the 4A XL it might actually legitimately be the 4A 5G. It might be the same exact device. We're not sure. Yeah. So I mean, do you have anything else to add on that?
It kind of makes sense that I saw no reason why Google would have killed the 4A XL going into this when we just had the assumption that there would be when this year's mid-range phone would come in two sizes. It never really made sense on why. Well, there was the argument that Google was really streamlining the offerings that they would be making available to around. This kind of makes sense too, in terms of like the R&D that they put into this phone, making its way into the world but as the 4A 5G.
Yeah, I think the reason that it was called, I mean, for all we know, it might not have ever even been the 4A XL. All of the rumors and speculation around the 4A 5G could have been the 4A 5G, or the 4A XL could have been the 4A 5G all along. I think the only reason that we or most blogs interpreted it as being the 4A XL and something that was supposed to launch alongside the 4A Google I/O was because that was precedent, that 3A had a 3A XL version last year. And so, everyone was on the lookout for a 4A XL, and maybe the reason the 4A XL rumor got started was because the 4A 5G was in development the whole time, and that the wires got crossed there. So that's very possible. We're not sure. So yeah, those are the Pixel 4A 5G and Pixel 5. I think now we have assuming all of our analysis of the situation, we're trying to piece things together as well as we can. Assuming all of that's right, it seems like we have a pretty clear view now of what these phones are going to be. We obviously don't have the full specs yet, or any of this, the close, like the bigger, I guess, details about. I mean, specifically, I think the big thing most people are probably curious about is what makes the Pixel 5 the Pixel 5. What is Google going to do there to make it stand out as clearly the top of the line phone that Google could charge maybe $700 for? And I think the answer is just going to be probably just pulling a lot of the premium premium tier features from the Pixel 4 and just plopping them in this one. That's probably the most likely scenario. Although we have to talk about this for a second. The death of, again, assuming all of our analysis is correct, the Face ID, or not Face ID, but face authentication.
Face unlock. Face unlock.
It's gone now for good.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not for good.
For now, let's say for 2020, which people a lot of people wear masks today. It's really not compatible with face unlock, and the fingerprint sensor is a true and tested solution. So I think they might get a pass this year for not including face unlock. But otherwise, it seems like a tactical retreat into. They made a big deal about their implementation of face unlock, and it's historically, Google with the Pixel 3, they tried two front-facing cameras to improve selfies. The 3XL had that notch, with the implication that the 3, that if they could have designed it, the smaller 3 would have also had a notch. And come the Pixel 4, they abandoned those two ideas. So it's not a very good track record of their commitments to new technologies, to their gimmicks, quote unquote. So yeah, it's not a good look for them in terms of how committed they are to adding new technologies and sticking through with it. Solely, does the Pixel 4 stay on sale officially at the Google Store, so that there is a solely device that developers can keep purchasing for whoever wants that? That is they made a big deal about this technology. This was ATAP's years in the making breakthrough that they were able to successfully miniaturize, and now it's gone. And there has to be some sort of statement there about why they're not featuring these two technologies. So I don't know how they handle that, because that's going to be another. And another thing, it's a very bad look for Android. Like Android apps, everybody wants developers to support the new biometric face unlock stuff, and there's no flagship phone come this year that will have that, with Google retreating from that. So these phones are a course correction. These phones definitely seem like a course correction, given the context of Rick Oster personally reading the phones division and him being upset at how the Pixel 4 turned out sales-wise, technical specs-wise. So I don't know. This course correction is probably for the best, but I don't think face unlock should have been one of those things they decided not to continue with.
Yeah, I think they were probably just designed into a corner on that. Like they couldn't. If they were going to drop down to the 765G, and they kind of hit the hard reset button, like you're saying, and kind of repositioned everything down a notch in terms of pricing, we're assuming. I mean, I don't know. It's like, David made a really good point to me earlier. Like, if the Pixel 5 has millimeter wave 5G on Verizon, that if we're following the same, I guess, the example of other 5G millimeter wave phones on Verizon, it could be really expensive. It could be stupid expensive. It could be $100 more than it should be. So at the same time, it might be expensive anyway. But, I don't know, like, I think that there was a lot of complaints about, the notch with the 3A or the 3 and the 3XL, or the 3XL, I should say. And then last year, Face ID, even though it was done better than most, save for Apple, it still had its own mini controversies at launch, right? Because it didn't, it wasn't until recently that it was able to refuse to unlock unless you opened your eyes. or was it attention? I forget what
Yeah,
you
the
call it.
eyes.
Is the eyes open or attention or both or something? But
Something
you know,
like
like that launch was definitely not flawless. And then Solely, man, like Solely, which is part of the same suite of hardware that Google put up in the top of this phone, Solely just flopped. Like there's no kinder way to put it. Like no develop was it even open really to developers? Like what
They
I
just
forget,
did
like
like a month ago. So at the start, they partnered with
of course they
us
did.
too, and the Pokemon thing, which everybody probably forgot
Right,
about.
right.
And then they, like a month ago, they just finally opened it up to third-party developers creating web experiences. So it's really, I I don't know what the future of that technology is. It could be interesting, but they're not really. The Pixel 4 wasn't the best showcase for it.
Yeah, it feels to me that Google's not just going to abandon these technologies. Like I don't think that Google is just with even with this year's hard reset, I don't think that Google is just going to drop Face Unlock and Solely completely. Maybe I mean maybe Solely, but I feel like Face Unlock is too inevitable for them to completely walk it back. I think with the Pixel 6 or whatever, or I don't know. Is Google going to keep building an $800, a $900, $1,000 phone at all? And if they do, are we going to see maybe some kind of formal or more so successor to the Pixel 4 next year? And Google is just kind of taking a year off on trying to do something premium and just give themselves a little bit of breathing room. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it does feel like the fact that this phone doesn't have Face Unlock it's really weird. It's really weird to see Google just hard revert back to the trajectory they were on with the Pixel 3 after a year.
In many ways, the Pixel 5 might be a better successor to the Pixel 3 line.
Right.
The 5 and 4A.
So it almost makes me wonder, like, what if they're not following? It's kind of like their approach is very scattershot, or it always has been. It always has been, but especially with this, it feels scattershot. And it's like, well, what if next year's phone is
totally different?
I think of Michael Scott in The Office, like snip snap snip snap. It's like what are we going back to the Pixel 6 being no fingerprint sensor with a face unlock again?
There is no lineage to the phones year after year. Like the Pixel 1 is the Pixel 2 is vastly different from the original Pixel. The Pixel 2 and Pixel 3 are somewhat closer in design language. They kept the shade. They had a look. Yeah. But the Pixel 4 was the departure. It was the real, we're going for this new design. These glass straight panels and just all that, get rid of the curvature. And I mean, we'll see what the Pixel 5 ends up looking like. But so over the place. Well, I assume that they'll be like what Apple's doing. They keep the body for 2 years,
right,
or more.
Yeah. And this has been. I'm hoping that this is something.
Jumping onto new industrial design.
I'm hoping that Google grows out of this, because this has been a problem with them for since day one. I mean, this has been the whole story of Google tablets, right? Like, it's like a random tablet here, a random tablet there. We're going to try tablets now. And it's like, well, if all this time you had just taken the slow but steady route and just slowly iterated on a product, if we went back to the days of the Nexus 9, which then became
the Nexus 7 was a perfect iteration.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, Nexus 7 into Nexus 9 into Pixel C. Like if Google had just slowly every, on some kind of schedule iterated on these tablets every, year and a half, 2 years even, we would have a very substantial, probably moderately successful Google tablet today. But they took the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach with the Pixel Slate, and it didn't stick. And so now Google has apparently said, well, we're not doing tablets anymore. We're just going to focus on laptops, because the first Pixel Book was a commercial success. But that it wasn't a commercial success because it was something orchestrated and planned and something that was slowly built over time. It was a commercial success because they threw it at the wall and just happened to stick. And and so it's like, where do we go from here? Now the Pixelbook Go. Pixelbook Go does not seem like a commercial success by any. I mean, we're all going off of just vague impressions of the market. Really, we don't really have any solid numbers, but it doesn't seem like it's a commercial success the same way the Pixelbook is or was. And I don't think I don't think that the numbers, if we were to see them, I don't think they would disagree. And so it's like the same thing's happening with phones now. Like they tried something last year with the Pixel 4. I think it would have been more brave of Google to stick with the same design, do the Pixel 4. It would have been more brave for Google to do literally the exact same phone again, but with no battery problems, and drop it $100 in price. Like, that would have been braver or more respectable, in my opinion, than them just throwing the Pixel 4 out and starting over, essentially. And now they're doing this phone that's kind of an iteration of the Pixel 2 line, Pixel 3 line, and it's dropping down to a 700 series processor, which, fine, I don't have any objective problems with any of these decisions. In fact, I'm personally kind of excited for the Pixel 5, but I just wish that Google would have some amount of consistency year over year, and you would think that they would have that figured out 5 years into this. That's just
I would just, every year feels like it's a restart, and I don't know why they want to restart it every single year.
Right, because it's just looking for those I don't know, just looking for success in.
What's the vision? There's all these things. What's the driving vision? I would say that the smart home division has a very
Nest is driving Google hardware right now. And actually, I tweeted about that, so that's a good segue. I kind of just got really annoyed this week because, David over at Android Police was tweeting some stuff about, how great the Pixel software experience it is, which it is. If anyone at Google is listening to this episode, we have so much praise for the software side of the Pixel, because it's by far the most consistent and most elegantly designed and the most cohesive experience on Android phones, full stop. So congrats on that part. But I just kind of got so annoyed because, someone was replying to that thread and saying, like, man, if the Pixel 4 had just had a better battery, then the Pixel, would have been a huge success last year, because you're right, the software is so great. And my take was like it's missing the forest for the trees so hard, because the reason the Pixel so far has not been successful, obviously a big part of it is everything we just described, which is, throwing everything out every year and starting over, it seems, or at least not building or iterating on things. Like, iterating on things even when they seem to not work at the beginning does not mean the idea was a bad idea, right? And that's kind of like, it's like Google is such a data-driven company that if one idea doesn't immediately take off, it is, it's immediately thrown out to pursue some other idea that might have immediate evidence of, data that's going to, show it's some kind of exponential growth. And anyways, what I was saying is, like, that's missing the forest for the trees. And what Google has to do to be successful is not, I don't think it has much to do with specs. I don't think it has much to do with whether or not the Pixel 4 has a good battery, or whether or not the Pixel 3 XL has a huge, ugly notch at the top. Like, that's not what is going to make or break the Pixel. Because, as evidenced by every other phone in the market that's not made by Samsung and not made by Apple, it's extremely hard to break into this duopoly, and that's just been the case with Android OEMs for probably, it's been ever since basically the first Pixel. We've just seen the death of LG smartphones. We've seen the death of HTC. We've seen the death of all these other third-party, this vibrant Android ecosystem. All had flagship phones at one point. And in the US, at least, I'm speaking about the US. I understand that in Europe and other markets, especially China, it's very different. But in the US, it's really Samsung and Apple, and that's it. And everyone else is 10% of the market, it seems like, maybe 20 at most. And even OnePlus, which has made great, has made great inroads with US carriers to some degree and is on the shelves in Verizon stores, they're not selling phones. Like OnePlus is the perfect Android phone, the OnePlus phones by Android fan standards. All of the people who write for Android police, they all use OnePlus phones for the most part as their daily drivers, if not Pixels. It's kind of, I'm not saying that I know that as a matter of fact. I'm saying that's the customer, right? Like all of these Android blogs, this entire Android ecosystem, all, they all just self-perpetuate these phones that happen to be the perfect, I guess, culmination of all the right specs. So this year we had 8 gigs of RAM and this much storage, and this is the price tag. And so it's like, the OnePlus 8 is kind of or OnePlus 8 Pro or whatever, like is the quote unquote like ideal Android phone in our little niche community. But in the real world, people buy iPhones and people buy the Samsung Galaxy S series and they buy the Note series. And that's, and obviously there's tons of smaller, the cheaper Apple phones and cheaper Samsung phones. But that's a vast majority of the market. And Google has to find a way to somehow matter in that. Like the Pixel has to matter somehow given that that's true. And I think earlier on the vision was we're going to somehow break into the duopoly, and there'll be 3 main players. There's going to be Samsung and Apple and Google, and we're going to be able to break in a way that LG never was able to, or has been, falling away from, or, HTC, obviously Google bought HTC, but, like that, I think that was originally the vision, but I think it's becoming more clear that just building a premium phone is not going to break Google into this, this duopoly. And it's not like, for the last few years, Verizon has had 3 sections in their retail store. I've talked about this on the show so many times. You walk in and there's 3 tent poles. There is Apple, there's Samsung, and there was Google, because Google and Verizon had that deal, and supposedly that deal almost fell through. So Google was on potentially going to see that.
Step down.
Exactly.
Step down from the virtual pedestal at those stores.
Exactly. And so the question is, this all comes to the question of how is the Pixel ever going to matter? And my argument is that it's going to matter as part of the Google ecosystem of smart home products, not as a smartphone player itself. I think when the vast majority of people who listen to our show, read our blog, when they think of Google hardware, they think Pixel. When I think of Google hardware, I think of Nest Hub Max, and I think of Nest Aware, and I think of Nest Protect, and I think of Nest Minis, the millions of Nest Minis that are just raining from the sky all the time. I literally have 2 on my shelf in my office that have not been unwrapped because I've just received them in various promotions or whatever. That's what I think of when I think of Google hardware. And I think the Pixel will find a reason to exist and will find some quote unquote success, relatively speaking, as part of that vision. And like you said, I think that's the vision that's driving Google hardware. So that's me in my soapbox.
Yeah. Speaking of Nest, the other thing that happened this week.
Yes. The Nest speaker, or whatever it's called, Google. Just a little bit of inside baseball. Friday, what was this? Yesterday, Thursday morning, Google. Yes. I've lost sense of the days. Google. So the Japanese FCC. Well, I guess you can tell the story. I've been talking too much. You go ahead.
Okay. So it actually starts Wednesday evening when the FCC in the US, they revealed a new Google device. It passed through certification. It had this model number that was uncharacteristic. We didn't quite know what it was. Our best guesses were the Sabrina, which is the rumored Chromecast successor / Android TV dongle, and Prince, the smart speaker that we also reported on earlier. And come overnight, I believe it was Android police first. They spotted these at the Japanese FCC equivalent full pictures of the device, and we got our first look at it. It's a bit tall. It's taller. It's slightly taller than the Home Max when it's laying down horizontally, and it from this is we're expecting this to be the somewhere between the Google Home, the one that was just recently sold out at the US Google store, and the Home Max. And the size, being able to see it against a ruler, really explains how big it is. But at the same time, those images were kind of ugly. They were shot in the dark, basically. I think everybody consolidated around the fact that it looks like a loaf of bread, and apparently Google could not stand that. They could not stand that people thought their next speaker looked like a loaf of bread.
Yeah, I genuinely felt so sad for whoever it was. I mean, not whoever, but the multiple people that worked on this product that had to see their product come out and make its first appearance in the world in the form of potato pictures from the Japan equivalent of the FCC. That's such a sad story.
Yeah. So 6
what they do about it?
6 p.m. Pacific, we and several other publications got this teaser video. We got an official image of what are we calling the blue one? Is it berry blue? I forgot what the Nest Mini.
I don't know.
Well, okay, whatever.
Sky blue.
Yeah, whatever. It's blue. Is
it the same color as the Nest Mini?
I think so.
Seems close.
Maybe they tinted it like they usually do year to year, but at the same time, if they were the same sky. So yeah, and we got this. It was kind of a dark background. It was a dark, like the lights are off kind of thing, and then it just showed the Nest, whatever this Nest speaker is, upright. And we also got a teaser video of the Nest team showing off the speaker in stereo configuration at their homes, working on what's coming next.
Yeah, I have to note something on the design front that I actually haven't told you yet, or that I noticed with the original Google Home. And in fact, the original Google Wi-Fi is kind of in this boat too, but the design was primarily plastic with this optional fabric at the bottom. I'm talking about the original Google Home, and you also had those covers that were also metal, so they weren't really all in on the whole fabric idea with the original Google Home. In fact, I think actually the original Google Home, all the primary marketing images I think were the gray fabric. So they had the fabric at that point, but it was, still kind of just an idea. And, with the Nest Mini, originally the Google Home Mini and the Google Home Max, they put the fabric at the front, right? So like the original Google Home had the plastic more at the forefront, and then the fabric was an idea. And then the Nest Mini and Google Home Max had the fabric at the front with a little bit of plastic underneath. I just thought it was interesting to see that progression has come full circle with this now, where it went from fabric as the second thought to then fabric as kind of at the forefront, and now it's all fabric. We're just gone all in. It's fabric or nothing.
Yes,
fabric on all sides.
Fabric on all sides. So yeah, it's tall. I think I like it. I can get used to it. You don't really interact with it. So there are four status lights that represent when Assistant's active. It's on the face. I'm kind of curious how the touch controls work. How pray pause pray pause mostly, or whether they're even going to have volume controls. I'm quite curious how you interact with it if it's standing upright, and it would presumably be lower than where you're standing, where your arms reach. I'm kind of curious how they do the touch controls, if they're even touch controls. But yeah, they're meant to they're modern bookshelf speakers. I think that's the look that Google's going for.
Yeah, I'm curious too how the touch is going to work. Um, for those that don't remember, the Nest Mini had some touch issues and on like day one where it was automatically triggering itself all the time. So
Yeah,
maybe I mean, the Nest Mini, the
the
second,
home. Yeah,
yeah,
Nest Mini.
The Nest Mini follow up did not have issues, and it did bring back the touch control in full, right?
Yep,
And
and they have
so
yeah.
it doesn't seem like, I mean, if the Nest Mini, the new one, had disregarded the touch controls completely, then um, maybe we would have speculated that this one was going to as well, but
Mm.
that's not what happened. So we just don't know what the story is on touch controls. But yeah, so that's the Nest speaker. It looks nice. It's very uninteresting, I think. I mean, it's half of a Google Home Max, basically. It looks like it's probably going to be about half of the uh, audio performance of a Google Home Max, and it's
How
probably going to be about half the price, probably
yeah,
$150. What do you think?
since it's cheaper, yeah, I do agree. It'll be definitely cheaper than Home Max. How hard do you think they're going to push um, having people buy two for stereo pairing? The
Yeah, I think
first,
they'll probably sell them in a two pack. You think?
oh, I hope so, because they really seem like they're pushing the idea of having the stereo pairing, and that probably being people's best speakers in the home. So yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
gonna be fun.
Yeah, I could see 129 for one or something like that, or maybe like 149 for one and then, 229 for two or something like that. I could easily see that. Um, and yeah, actually, Austin Murphy, he's a fan of the site. He listens to the show and he comments on Twitter a lot. He said, I just want to be able to pair my two Prince speakers to my Sabrina TV dongle along with various Nest Minis for multi-channel surround sound. Now that would be awesome.
That would be yeah,
Uh,
that'd be great.
that's the dream. I mean, I need a way to use my Google Home Minis or my Nest Minis, and that's actually a great idea. I never thought about using them as surround sound speakers, although they would be nowhere
Yeah,
close to the quality of a typical surround sound system.
it yeah, that's going to look good. Honestly, they're going to they're probably going to have a shot with all these products together, and Google TV. When that rebrand happens, with side by side Nest speakers, that's going to look good in terms of having a cohesive solution for the living room.
Yeah. So what else happened this week? Google had a little bit of a Google Assistant works with Google Assistant event this week that they announced some minor little things for developers
Yeah.
for works with Google.
Yeah, so developers, this was primarily a developer-focused event, and which is funny because everybody thought they were going to announce a Nest speaker since it was a smart home event, and Google ended up announcing the Nest speaker, but not at the event. So yeah, that was a funny turn of events. So yeah, so there were quite a handful of developer announcements, but what's most relevant to consumer-facing features is so Nest devices today, they have this very useful home away feature, home away status sensing, knowing when you're home and knowing when you leave, so that it can automatically shut down the lights or turn them back on when you come back, arm your security system, set your thermostat down, all that kind of stuff. So that's only available on Nest products today. But Google for Assistant, is working on something called presence detection, where you'll be able to basically just have those features and use them at your existing routines. That's something to modernize. Another thing they're doing is the other minor thing they're doing is so if you have Philips Hue light bulbs, this is a really cool feature to turn up your lights as you wake up and on the opposite when you sleep. So Google said
Mhm.
to bring that to all smart lights probably this year. But anyways, the general point is that they want to boost up routines, and Google hasn't really had a proper assistant event this year. Say for CES and Vegas, they had a few announcements, but yeah, I guess this was a tease of what's to come, since they definitely work on assistant every year, and they definitely are going to have features for the smart home. So I guess the announcing it alongside the hardware event that's probably going to work out quite well.
Yeah, and actually, part of that event was they used this new branding, and I'll just talk about this really briefly. But they used this new branding. I'm not going to say it because if I say it too many times, it's going to activate everyone's smart speakers. But apparently, they changed this. How all these retail products have little tags on them that tell you that they work with the Google Assistant. They apparently changed that wording from "works with Google Assistant" to "works with Hey G." I'm not going to say the word because yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, I kind of put together a little bit of a matrix on that, showing how the branding compares across the board on on Amazon products. That the assistant is called Alexa, and it works with Alexa is the verbiage that's typically used, and then Alexa is the hot word that activates a speaker. On Apple side, Siri is the name of the assistant, works with HomeKit, etc. is the branding for that. And then Hey Siri, sorry for people who have iPhones. If you have an iPhone, I guess you shouldn't be listening to this show. So sorry. Uh, actually, that I'm talking to myself, but whatever. That's the branding on Apple side of things. And then with Google, it's been Google Assistant, works with Google Assistant, and then obviously Hey G or OKG has been the hot word. And so I don't know. It's just what do you have any like takeaway? Does this signal anything to you? We're definitely overanalyzing it, but
Well, I'm going to overanalyze it. So it's interesting. So when Google announced Google Assistant for the first time at I/O 16,
yep.
they showed off the Google Home. Their pitch was giving everybody a personal Google, a custom Google that knows you and is your assistant. So that was the original coming out of Google Assistant, and Google likes naming things with they like putting the purpose of the product in the name, and that leads to many very general sounding things. But yeah, so I guess if we really want to overanalyze the heck out of this change to works with Hey G, maybe Google thinks that Assistant is at a point where when people think of Google, it's the assistant that it no longer needs that Google no longer needs to append Google Assistant to the product, because Google is maybe could be naturally what people assume to be. Of course, Google is an assistant to you, is helpful to you. So I don't know, maybe that's something that they
Yeah,
could
another
be
thing,
working with.
I don't know if this is, I'm not 100% sure on this, but if I remember correctly, originally when Google announced the Google Assistant, it was actually a lowercase a. So it was not, I don't think they
Ooh.
were originally using it as a proper noun. And I think that after the Google Assistant was announced, people used Google Assistant as the equivalent of Alexa or Siri, as the proper noun name of the assistant itself. And I don't think Google anticipated that. I think they were thinking that it would be picked up as the Google Assistant, not the Google Assistant, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
The emphasis being on the word Google. I think they wanted Google to be the name of the assistant, but they don't really need another name because they wanted people to just use the word Google, which they do. That's how we interact with it. We say Hey G or OKG rather
Uh-huh.
than on Apple or Amazon side. You actually say the name of this ambiguous female person.
Yeah.
With the female name has been controversy in and of itself.
Yes.
And so Google's avoided that problem for sure. But I think originally their hope was that people would just it would be the Google lowercase assistant. It would be the Google Assistant, and it kind of became the proper noun. And I think that with their switch over to works with Hey G, they're now realizing, oh, we can use Hey G as the proper name or as the proper noun, and that makes a lot more sense as a proper noun equivalent to Alexa or Siri than the long and clunky Google Assistant as a proper noun. I don't know. That's my feeling on it.
I don't like the hey, seeing the hey in these logos, in these stickers. I mean, yeah, it helps people know what the hardware is, but I think everybody at this point knows how that works. But I'm not crazy about the hey part specifically.
Yeah. Well, I think we've probably hit time for the show. We're trying not to drag these out because we really want people to be able to listen to them and not feel emotionally or fatigued trying to listen to these long shows. And I know that we can definitely get super deep in the weeds and really, drag these conversations out. So on that note, I think we are actually going to end the show there. We really appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. It's been really fun talking about these upcoming phones. Thank you, Google, for leaking the names, which gave us kind of the ability to kind of piece together the puzzle for what was happening this year. Side note, sometimes I wonder if the Android team and the Pixel team have some kind of miniature internal conflict, that maybe the Android team intentionally does this. I had that thought today that maybe the Google app developers were they left it in on purpose.
Sure.
Annoy the people on the other side of the pond. I don't know how the ponds work at Google. I don't know who's on what side. So I don't know if maybe the developer that pushed out this update was actually on the hardware side. I don't know. Probably not. But anyways, thank you for listening, everyone. We really appreciate you tuning in. You can listen to this show here every week on youtube.com/9to5Google. We record this podcast pretty much weekly on a Thursday or a Friday, sometimes Wednesdays. Really just depends on the news of the week. And you can find us on all your favorite podcasting platforms, such as iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and you can download the podcast every week directly from 9to5google.com. You can head to 9to5google.com/guides/alphabet-scoop to find the entire archive of the show in case you want to go listen to some older episodes. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.